So what I'm going to do is to show you how we sprout what we call the black mix. Now, first of all, you want a container like this, which we have drilled all sorts of holes in, all around the bottom, and also partially up the sides as well. And what we're going to do is to pour 1 litre of the black mix into this container. Now, the handy thing about a 1 litre measure is that 1 litre, roughly speaking, equals 1 kilo. So what I'm putting into there is 1 kilo of black mix. And that's what it looks like. Oops, daisy. That's what it looks like before it's sprouted. Now we put the whole container inside this container, which has no holes whatsoever. And you'll see the reason for that in a few seconds. Before we go any further, let me explain about Virkon S, because we're going to put some Virkon S into the mix before we put water on. Virkon S is a broad spectrum, virucide, bactericide and fungicide. In other words, it kills all the nasty things that are likely to infect our sprouted seed. And it's particularly important because it's a fungicide, because one of the most virulent things we get in sprouted seed, of course, is fungus, far more so even than bacteria. So therefore, Virkon S is the cat's whisker for this kind of job. The other benefit of Virkon S is, of course, is that we don't need to rinse at all, because it's perfectly safe to use as in its dilute form. For example, in Europe, the chuck industry use it there for just sweetening up the drinking water, stopping the drinking water from becoming infected. But of course, that's in dilute proportions. Let me stress, you wouldn't feed Virkon S raw to your birds, only in a very dilute form. So, how much do we need? Well, in our experiments, we put a whole teaspoonful in. And you may need to experiment a little bit in your location to ensure or to get the absolute optimum measurement of how much Virkon S you need. I would suggest probably a teaspoonful would be the maximum, and we actually here use about half a teaspoonful. That effectively means we're using about 2.5 grams. So all I've done is sprinkle it on the top, and now what I'm going to do is to use That's just enough water to cover the whole thing, and you see there's some in the bottom. And I stir the whole thing up just to make sure that the Virkon S is dispersed throughout all the seed. And then we put a lid on. In this case, it's a lid with holes, but as often as not, I use a lid without holes. And that goes on the top and just loose. And we leave this now for 1.5 hours as a minimum, but 2 hours as a maximum. And that's fairly important because what happens is if you go beyond the 2 hours, the seed becomes very soggy, it's very hard to dry out to the right consistency, and it actually slows down the process of germination, which of course is what we don't want. So we leave that there like that now then for, let's say, an hour and 3/4. We'll compromise on the time. And then at the end of that time, we just take it out. We see it's all dripping out. And we just leave it on the sink top. Now, what I do, I just put something underneath, tip it like this, and it just means it drains out that much faster. And then when it's been there, I mean, I do that this morning. Tonight when I come in, turn the lights off in the kitchen. What I'll do is rake that up like this, and like that, just to get this drying process actually working. Now, I retain the humidity by putting on the lid. Just like that, but it's now beginning to sort of drain out really well. Now, that's only important if what you intend to do afterwards is freeze your sprouted seed and or freeze soft food. Because if you put very wet seed into your freezer, by definition what's going to happen is when you pull it back out again, it's going to be a block of ice. So we leave that now for, well, until tomorrow morning. Basically, this is today now. This morning, we leave it overnight. Through today, overnight until tomorrow, and then I'll take the lid off because by then it's just beginning to chit, and I want that to dry out really from that point on as much as possible. In terms of sprouting time, we have two mixes, the white mix and the black mix. Black mix sprouts within about 15 to 20 hours, obviously depending on the ambient temperatures. And the white mix between 20 depending on the ambient temperatures. And that's why we have two separate mixes, a white mix and a black mix, because they both sprout at different in different time scales. Right, so that is the basics of the exercise. Now, let me just stress that what we're looking for here is the content of the seed. The sprout is of no interest to us whatsoever, because we're losing the nutrient. The longer the sprout, the less nutrient we have in the seed. So all we want the seed to do is to undergo the process of germination, and the proof that it's done that to the optimum level, so it's got the optimum of nutritional value, is it's got a little tiny white chit, as we call it. Not a shoot, it's a chit. And that's what we want. And just as another, by the way, why do we want to sprout seed at all? Well, the reason for that is because what you're doing is increasing the nutritional value of each seed by, very crudely, 300%. Obviously, it depends which actual ingredient of the seed you're talking about. But also, it turns the carbohydrate content into simple sugars, sucroses, glucoses, fructoses, which of course means it's a very, very high energy package for particularly nestlings. And the fact that it has been softened also makes it easier to digest. And in this exercise, I'm talking about the actual parent bird, which partially digests the seed before it feeds it to the nestlings. Obviously, that also decreases with the age of the nestlings. So what else do I need to tell you about?